1. September 2020. Würzburg, Staatarchiv. 2020 Municipal Archive. My job is to scan every document. My neighbor's grandparents are turning into PDFs. He writes it in pencil at a steel desk, a municipal desk purchased in the 1950s, repainted 3 times, still dented from a move in 1969. It is a dangerous sentence because it is honest. It could not have been spoken openly in the mayor's office in 1955. It sits on the page like a key. He is Karl. He was born in 1933 on a street that no longer exists. He is an archivist now, or more precisely, a caretaker of paper. He is older than the city's new bridges and younger than its oldest scars. He knows how things end up in files. He knows what files do to people. Würzburg was burned on 1/16 March 1945. The center was 90% destroyed in 19 minutes. Those numbers are not opinions. They are mathematics, recorded by fire brigade logs and RAF briefing reports, confirmed by aerial photographs, double-checked by the municipal building register. The map went white because heat took color out of it. That is the arithmetic of a city under 800 tons of high explosive and incendiary devices. A night calculated by staff officers in England and felt by a boy under a table in Lower Franconia. He remembers the morning after. It was hot and black, he wrote later. I learned the taste of soot. That sentence appears in a school composition from 1946, preserved in a bundle labeled Schulausschätze, 1946-47, Class of 4B. The handwriting is careful. The teacher's red pencil underlines soot and praises the metaphor. Children do not know what metaphors cost until after. The immediate aftermath has its own grammar. Curfew hours, billeting, rubblescapes and scavenging. The arithmetic of 1 shovel shared by 3 hands. The word Klimmerfrau is a compound noun that could only be forged in a language that stacks words like bricks. The women were bricks, and they lifted bricks, and they made the street passable. They went into the city with scarves wrapped tight and came out with back pain. They organized in blocks without men because the men were away, or dead, or would never be more than a name on a Feldpostkarte. On 6 April 1945, American reconnaissance vehicles entered from the west. The Municipal Chronicle, written by a clerk with a typewriter salvaged from the ruins of the Neuburgkirche, notes U.S. units in town, no major resistance. The battle for Würzburg had ended days earlier. House-to-house fighting had moved north of the river. The archive has a photograph, 2 GIs standing with cigarettes on the old main bridge, looking at toppled saints. They stand as if they have time. They do not know the city's mathematics yet. They will learn our hunger by the line of children under their jeep. The first leaflets were in plain German. Bleiben Sie zu Haus, they said. Stay at home. Curfew 200 hours. Surrender all weapons. Turn in party badges. The American military government in Bavaria opened an office 2 streets from the destroyed Rathaus. It brought stamp pads and forms. Bureaucracy came back in a khaki uniform. Karl's father did not come home. His name appears in a Red Cross missing persons list, last reported near Glogau, Silesia, in January 1945. The list is reproduced in the Bundesarchiv, Series DRK2. It is the astronomy of absence. It has columns and rows and small boxes for rank, unit, date of last letter. It is a catalogue of the arithmetic of loss. Every box is a subtraction with no remainder. The Trümmerfrauen formed gangs because rubble requires gangs. The Municipal Occupation Report for June 1945 notes, 4,200 women organized in 12 detachments, paid in food, clearing the Kaiserstrasse and Domstrasse. Payment is bread. Bread is ration cards. Ration cards are paper turned into calories. In 1945, the mathematics of eating involved 4 forms and a stamp, and if a stamp went missing, your stomach felt it. The first summer felt like a reprieve until the letters arrived. Prisoner of war mail in thin envelopes, opened and resealed by censors. "I am alive," one wrote. "Do not send parcels. I hear there is nothing." The mathematics of distance is cruel in a year without trains or butchers. The winter after, 1946 to 47, was a hunger winter. In the American zone, official rations dropped to as low as 1,040 calories per day for the normal consumer. The term normal, in that phrase, is one of the small, obscene jokes of administration. A young man on a building site will burn 2,600. A woman clearing rubble will burn 2,000. To be normal is to be honest about an empty belly. On the wall of the archive is a poster of a ration schedule from November 1946. It lists grams of fat and flour per week, numerals in bureaucratic columns. The numbers are not negotiable. They are mathematical statements. In 1946, the mathematics of butter was as hard as algebra and more important. Lucky strikes became a currency. The black market on Bahnhofstrasse was loud and efficient. Cigarettes moved beans, potatoes, and sometimes mercy. The term Bohnen Express appears in the American intelligence summaries, trains of undernourished townspeople riding out to the country to barter. An egg cost 2 cigarettes. A liter of schnapps cost 20. The ledger is in the head. If I carry coal for him, he will give me a piece of bacon. If I report him, he may disappear. The moral calculus and the calorie calculus began to merge. The American military government issued orders against hoarding. It also wrote long, cold reports about our condition. The OMGGU Intelligence Report, Bavaria, 23 January 1947, includes a paragraph on Würzburg's hospitals reporting increased cases of edema, loss of hair, menstrual disorders among women of working age due to malnutrition. This is not a metaphor. It is the arithmetic of fat and blood. The occupation regime also brought forms with questions of a different kind. Denazification. Fragebogen, 31 points, single-spaced. The question burst the past into boxes. Were you a party member? When? Were you a blocklighter? Did you contribute to the Winterhilfswerk? Did you attend political meetings? What was your rank? Do you have witnesses for your claim to innocence? There are lines for signatures. The mathematics of guilt became a matter of categories. Spruchkammern denazification tribunals met in classrooms and hotel ballrooms because real courtrooms had been burned. The categories were 5: Hauptschuldig, major offenders; Belastet offenders; Minder Belastet, lesser offenders; Mitlaufer followers; Entlaufftet, exonerated. The clerk who wrote them on the chalkboard rubbed his hands afterward, as if the chalk were contagious. People queued to be judged by neighbors, served by panels that included anyone not disqualified and willing to sit for long days at long tables. Karl, still a boy, carried a note to one of these rooms for his mother. She had worked at a baker's. The baker had been party since 1932. His shop had a plaque. He had never shouted. He had hired her because her father had died. The baker's file includes a Perselschein, a whitewashing letter, written by a customer. He baked extra loaves for families with many children. The Spruchkammer declared him a Mietlöfer and fined him a week's gross income. The mathematics of guilt there is a simple exercise. There is guilt of an amount, and it is converted to marks of an amount, and the scales balance enough to continue. This is how a city moves forward without moving too far. The files fill cabinets. In Unterfranken, between 1946 and 1948, tens of thousands of cases were opened. Bundesarchiv records show that in Bavaria, the majority fell into the category of Mitläufer, or were exonerated. The statistics are mathematical and blunt. Of those investigated, a small percentage were labelled belastet, fewer still were hauptschuldig. The numbers are less a portrait of innocence than of necessity. Evaluating the past had to be operationalized. The mathematics of institution building after catastrophe is the study of thresholds. How many guilty can be punished without paralyzing the machine? How many followers can return without rotting the foundation? This pragmatic mathematics had faces. The former Kreisleiter who vanished. The police chief who took off his uniform waited, then came back in a suit and a new title. File B917-EN at the Staatarchiv. A memorandum dated 12 November 1947. Recommendation to re-employ Herr L., formerly head of municipal procurement, as consultant, given his experience and the acute lack of qualified personnel. No evidence of criminal conduct categorized as minderbelastet, subject to oversight. He returns with a different business card. He has to eat. The city needs someone who knows which bricks are stronger. The arithmetic of rooms was worse. In 1946 and 1947, trains and carts brought expellees from Silesia and the Sudetenland. On one day in May 1946, a requisitioned schoolhouse in the Heidingsfeld district registered 327 people. They had suitcases and a few quilts. They had documents proving property in towns that now had different names. The municipal housing office kept ledgers of inhabited space, how many square meters per person. The office had a target, 8 square meters per head. A family in a 2-room apartment with 3 beds suddenly had strangers sleeping at the foot of one. We came with nothing, says an oral history recorded in 1994 with Anna W., born 1925 in the Sudetenland. We were told, "You are Germans, you will be taken in by Germans." They said it as if it was simple. It was not simple. The arithmetic of compassion meets the arithmetic of scarcity. The locals call the newcomers Fluchtlinge or Vertriebene. The newcomers call the locals war profiteers because they are in their own house. The housing office file for 1947 includes letters in different inks, different handwritings, complaints about shared privies, broken beds, theft of potatoes. There are also letters with helpfulness inside. We can take one more for the winter. An old couple in Steinbachtal wrote that sentence. They took a child, then kept him. The city is not a set of categories, it is a crowd of small exceptions. The Americans called their reports civil affairs. They wrote in an antiseptic style and recorded our fever without catching it. An Allied intelligence summary for Lower Franconia dated 3 March 1946 states, incidents of assault on expellees increasing, cause identified as competition for food and lodging. Some resentment of perceived preferential treatment of DPs. DPs, displaced persons. They were in camps on the edge of town, in barracks built for other purposes. Jewish survivors, Poles, Balts, Ukrainians, forced laborers and former POWs. In Wildflecken, 30 miles away, a DP camp grew into a city of its own. The files are thick, medical complaints, food issues, cultural events in Yiddish and Polish. Contact with victims was not theoretical. It walked past on the street. German households traded with DPs because DPs had cigarettes. Sometimes they traded information. Sometimes they avoided eyes. On 21 April 1945, Americans marched civilians from Dachau to see the camp. In Franconia, across the river from Würzburg, people went to Hammelburg to see the POW camp where their men had been held. The film of the camps was shown in city cinemas by military order. Compulsory viewing, reads the program. In the archive there is a ticket stub. A mother kept it. She wrote on it, "I could not see. I took off my glasses." That is a strategy. Memory is a muscle. It can be trained to look. Our school books were another strategy. Between 1949 and 1955, textbooks approved by the new Bavarian Ministry of Culture moved the focus. They taught civic education and the basic law. They taught our rights. They taught that the Nazis had been a time of error and a break in legality. They taught about bombings, about hunger, about expulsion. They did not teach in detail about neighbors who denounced neighbors. They did not teach about the arithmetic of how 6 million becomes one sentence. We wrote about the air raid of March, says a class chronicle from 1952. We practiced writing appeals for more coal. That is truthful about one thing. It is not truthful about all things. An entry from the Municipal Memorial Book for 1950 lists the names of the dead in the air raids. The list is long. There is no list for those who were deported. Those lists would be made later. The memorial culture of the early 1950s is the mathematics of our suffering set into stone, with a calculation of dignity and silence. The Bund der Vertriebenen held rallies in the market square called Tage der Heimat, Days of Homeland. Speeches talk about injustice and loss. They talk about the East as if it were a toy taken by a bad neighbor. They do not talk about what we did to other neighbors. The arithmetic is missing a column. Karl grew older and learned to add. In 1948, there was a currency reform. On 20 June at 6 a.m., the Deutsche Mark became the currency of the Western zones. They gave 40 marks per person at first. People lined up with old Reichsmarks and got new paper that smelled like opportunity. Shelves filled. The black market shrank. This was both economic policy and social policy all at once. The mathematics changed. Now the price of an egg was a number again, not a cigarette. The Benno Martin Bridge was rebuilt in Würzburg in 1950. It is not a particularly beautiful bridge, but it carries cars. Carrying cars is a kind of beauty in a place that had only rubble and handcarts 5 years earlier. Marshall Plan shipments arrived at the freight station. Boxes stenciled with USA and ERP, European Recovery Program. The Municipal Receiving Ledger from 1949 lists powdered milk, flour, tins of meat. It also lists engineering manuals, technical journals. An American officer gave a speech about democracy at the Chamber of Commerce. The minutes describe polite applause. There was gratitude, but gratitude has its own mathematics. There are sums you cannot pay back. Sometimes you do not want to. Karl took a job in 1951 at the building office. He was a clerk with clean fingernails and a stamp. He carried files from shelf to shelf and watched names move from list to list. He saw a man come to ask for a permit to build a new wall on a house whose old walls he had condemned as a municipal inspector in 1939. The old title appears in his personnel file. The new stamp covers the old. 1933-45, party membership, promotion, wartime collaboration, unknown. 1946, denazification. 1949, provisional reinstatement. 1951, permanent position. This is the mathematics of continuity. The Basic Law had Article 31, which provided for the re-employment of civil servants dismissed after 1945. Bundesarchiv records show the policy's spread across the Länder. It is both a legal mechanism and an equation. Without experienced administrators, the state cannot function. With them, the state carries history in under its coat. Karl's supervisor, a man with lungs damaged by a gas attack in 1918, explained the new arithmetic. We need people who know how to count bricks. The city prioritized, built, drilled, and eventually paved. The new democracy, Karl felt even then, rested on unspoken bargains. The silence was thick in offices. In the canteen, men ate soup and told anecdotes about potatoes. They did not tell anecdotes about neighbors taken away in the night. They did not talk about women who scrubbed the sidewalks because they wore the wrong star. When someone did speak, he lowered his voice. That is not a metaphor. The archive has a notation in a city council transcript. Herr P. asked to speak off the record. Off the record is a kind of silence you can store. He married in 1956. The wedding photograph has the new bridge in the background. The bride's dress is simple. The groom's suit is borrowed. Behind them, on a street whose facade has been reconstructed with old stones and new concrete, a poster advertises a lecture on the European idea. The book Carl keeps in his bedside drawer at the time is about a boy who survives a train crash. He underlines a sentence. He believed survival made him substantial. He does not know where the sentence came from. He thinks often about scale. A surviving city is not a blank. It is a palimpsest. It is a ledger with too many columns erased. In the late 1950s, work accelerated. Volkswagen sold cars in West Germany to people who used to take the tram. In the statistics from the Federal Statistical Office, industrial production rose, wages rose, kitchens gained refrigerators, women bought washing machines with installment plans. The mathematics of a Saturday became shopping and cooking and then cinema. The memorials became background. In the 1960s, a different mathematics arrived in the street. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trials began in 1963. Television brought the testimonies into living rooms. Carl remembers watching, standing, not sitting, because it felt wrong to sit. He writes in a notebook a sentence, "We are listening, finally." The sentence is too simple. The 1968 generation yelled at their parents. They yelled at our generation too. The files did not change, but voices moved inside them. The Bundesarchiv began to catalogue things differently. Municipal offices got letters from students asking to see records from 1938. Some old men refused permission. Some did not know they were allowed to say yes until someone explained the new law. The arithmetic of secrecy shifted its base. Carl transferred from the building office to the archive in 1972. He liked the quiet. He did not like the dust, but he liked the order. The cards in the catalogue were a map. His first tasks included indexing bound volumes of occupation reports. He learned to touch paper with a respect you reserve for both brittle things and loaded rifles. He learned that the dossier is a person without a face. He married again after he became a widower. He had a son late in life who once called him a museum. He didn't mind. Schoolbooks changed. By the late 1970s, they included more pages about the Shoah, Kristallnacht, deportations. The 9 November commemorations were held in town halls. The Kristallnacht plaque went up on the wall of the ruined synagogue, then was replaced by a newer plaque when the old one weathered. The city began to set small brass stolperstein in the pavement. The numbers in the municipal budget for culture and memory grew thinly. The arithmetic of remembrance learned to live alongside the arithmetic of parking spaces. The Cold War had its own ledger. Würzburg, like many cities, hosted American soldiers. The McKee barracks were built on the edge of town. The officers bought sausages in the market. They married girls from the Altstadt. They had children and then flew away. In 1983, the city council discussed a proposed NATO double-track protest route. The minutes record objections from local businesses. The mathematics of security and commerce made a compromise. The marchers marched on a Saturday. The shops closed early. Carl learned the microphysics of paper. He learned to notice the different fibers of 1930 stationery. He learned to understand the smell of 1945. It has mold and coal dust in it. He learned to read office codes. Cado 7743 is not a house number. It is a unit inside the Ordnungspolizei, or maybe a hint of a person whose last name begins with I. The archive has guides. He learned to use them like maps of a battlefield he refused to draw. Personal stories creep in around the edges of form. A letter from a woman named Else who writes in 1946 to the housing office that she is willing to take in a sick expellee. A complaint about a boy who throws stones at a DP truck. An appeal from a school principal in 1942 for more coal because the children are going to sleep in class. The arithmetic of heat. The arithmetic of heat. The city's denazification files sit in a cool room with shelves numbered in a system that makes sense to a single mind and therefore is eternal. The forms are plodding and then suddenly alive. I was not overzealous, one man writes. Another says, I joined to keep my job. There are, here and there, sentences that burn through ink. I did not know. I heard rumors. I thought it was the law. The mathematics of responsibility is a terrible calculus because it often has to start with the facts that were felt rather than known. An Allied interrogator's margin note in a 1946 transcript mentions a local who speaks good English, London accent, but claims no knowledge of any arrests at his station. An arrow points to block warden. The interrogator writes, impossible. He underlines it twice. The dossier closed with a fine and a note, not to be employed in any police function. In 1955, he is working at the customs office. The archive also keeps files about the defendants linked to proceedings that never happened because witnesses were tired or dead or had made their peace. Each non-event is documented. This, too, is mathematics. Carl kept a private notebook in the 1980s. Old men write diaries. He writes notes. A sentence from 1982. The mathematics of guilt is like a ledger where the left side has ink that fades. A sentence from 1988. A young woman asked for the file of Herr Fee to see if her teacher had been in the party. He had. She cried in the reading room. He did not say anything. Archivists do not console with words. They hold out a glass of water and put a box of tissues on the table. Comfort is not their job. Order is. He worked through the 1990s. He remained as the city changed. Kodak boxes came in with photographs of the 1940s found in attics. Oral histories from people who had not spoken began to arrive. I was afraid, said a woman who had been a maid for an SS man. I took his coats to the cleaners. They came back with a smell I will not name. He wrote down the word smell. He made it into a card because it seemed like a keyword that would return. He retired officially in 1998. He did not leave. He came in 3 days a week. He accepted no salary. He accepted coffee and the right to sit in his chair. He learned to use a scanner in 2004. He did not like it. He did it anyway because paper ages. Information does not age the same way. It flickers. It depends on electricity. But the stack in the next room is a fire hazard. The mathematics of preservation is a compromise between what you love and what you can keep. He signs out the scanner in a logbook. He writes his name like a verdict. In the 2000s, the city's visitor book includes names from Israel and Poland. A man from Chicago writes, "My grandmother was from here." A school class from the nearby gymnasium visits the reading room. They are polite and bored until they touch the letters with their own fingers. There is something about handwriting that pushes through all strategies of denial. It disobeys the ideology of the clean page. In 2015, refugees arrived from Syria. The headlines call it a crisis. The city debates. The archive is not a place for debates. It is a room with a timeline and chairs. But the staff feels the symmetry. They pull the housing office ledger from 1946. They show it to a journalist. He writes a story about then and now. The arithmetic of compassion is tested again. Some numbers remain the same, some do not. Back to the beginning. 1 September 2020. The scanning project is municipal, funded by a state program that has an acronym. It will inventory and digitize the denazification files, the occupation records, the early city council minutes. It will ensure access. It will also, as all such projects do, drag names out of the cool and into the glare. Carl writes the line, "My neighbor's grandparents are turning into PDFs." It is factual. It is also accusatory, but only if you know what the files contain. He thinks of the baker. He thinks of Anna W., who came with nothing and stayed with almost nothing and then made a life. He thinks of the policeman who did not arrest again because he died. He thinks of the whitewashing letters per Silsheen. He was kind. He gave extra meat. He was always polite. He does not mock these letters. They are what people could do. The mathematics of witness was bent by fear and hunger and habits. It does not add to zero. He puts the file on the scanner. The glass is cool. He adjusts the frame. He aligns the page with its stamp from 1946. He wipes dust with a flat brush. He sees at the bottom the faint watermark of notepaper bought in a shop that burned in March. He presses the button. The machine sings a short tone. The light bar moves. It captures ink that a man has left to dry in a hurry 74 years before. The machine writes it in a different code and captures also the creases and the shadow of the paper's edge. The memory leaves the room and sits in a server across town. The copy is cleaner than his own thought. Each document has an accession number. Each file has a context note. The catalog entry will include subject headings, denazification, Würzburg, 1946, 1948, Spruchkammer, Mitläufer, expellees, occupation. It will include names, some of which are common, some rare. It will obey the privacy law's arithmetic, the data protection term that says, we may publish this and not that, unless the person is public, unless the weight of the public interest tips the scale. He holds a page with a signature he recognizes from letters in the 1930s. The man wrote then about university donations, and later about ration allocations. The line of his name has thinned and thickened with time. It becomes a graph of survival. He thinks the front line after 1945 ran through offices, not streets. We were saved by forms and trapped by them. We counted ourselves into a democracy with fingers that trembled, and into households of insufficient square meters, and into jobs on committees that had new names and old chairs. The war after the war is an arithmetic problem you cannot solve completely. The archive has a police report from May 1945, a typewritten page that begins with a list of things handed in by citizens: 6 pistols, 12 knives, 1 radio. The last line says, "A woman came with a bundle of papers in a pillowcase." It does not say what the papers are. Those papers are probably here, or their absence is here, which is also present. He thinks of the pillowcase as an image and as a bag full of the mathematics that will govern his city's next decades. He keeps reading. He keeps scanning. He reads an Allied weekly information guide from December 1945 that tells citizens that fraternization is now permitted in certain circumstances. He imagines the mathematics of romance interviewed by the mathematics of policy, then married in the municipal office where he has stood for 3 decades, where the registrar still has the big book with blank spaces and tiny columns for religion and occupation that have become anachronisms. The ledger outlasts the regime. He scans a letter from a man in 1947 begging the Spruchkammer to downgrade his category from Minderbelasseter to Mitläufer because my son cannot attend gymnasium. The Spruchkammer writes back, insufficient grounds. In 1950, the son passes the entrance exam anyway. The man writes again and says thank you. The archive keeps both letters. The mathematics of guilt has variations. It intersects with the mathematics of ambition and the mathematics of privilege. Exclusion becomes inclusion by persistence, not by judgment. The file is a map of how we adjust. He scans a handbill announcing a 1950 rally of the Bund der Vertriebenen in the market square. The handbill has black letters on white paper. It says, rights, not alms. It says, home. It says, known. It says, W.E. remember. He has learned to read the ways in which memory uses capital letters as a tool. He has learned to notice that the word home, it sits in a handbill, and it sits in his own chest. He scans it anyway. He is not responsible for the content, only the access to it. He stops at noon for a sandwich. He eats it standing, because the desk is full of paper. He thinks of 1946 and 1947. He remembers standing in a soup line in winter. He remembers the physics of a tin cup in cold hands. He thinks of the arithmetic of calories. He thinks of his mother in a scarf with a shovel, the Trümmerfrau, who did not call herself that. He thinks of the mathematics of a single egg. His lunch is mathematics too, and it has a price and a receipt. He keeps the receipt because he keeps everything. He will throw it out when the drawer is full. After lunch, he pulls the box labeled Displaced Persons, Wildflecken 1945–47. He scans a Yiddish theatre program. He scans a medical report filled with abbreviations in English. He scans a photograph of a makeshift classroom in a barracks. He hears a voice in the caption that is not ours. The caption says, "We are building." He is humbled by the arithmetic of newness in that sentence. He scans a complaint from a local man about noisy songs. The complaint is polite. It is in a careful hand. He thinks, that is what we do, complain about noise, to keep from hearing the thing itself. The Cold War enters again. A 1952 report on a protest by expellees against the Oder-Neisse line. A 1955 cabinet memo about negotiations with the USSR and the return of POWs. In 1955, trains brought home men from the camps in the east. The town square was crowded. The church bells rang. The archive has a photograph of girls holding bouquets. The arithmetic of return has its own ceremony. The men are thin. They stand as if they will remain standing, because sitting is dangerous in a body that does not trust chairs. Among them is a man who was reported missing in 1944 and whose wife married again in 1950. The civil registry has the record. The arithmetic of love is merciless and human. The new marriage remains. The man finds lodging in a room and a job at the tannery. Carl scans an Allied Information Service leaflet from 1945 warning against listening to enemy stations. He scans, then, a post-war radio license from 1948. He keeps thinking about how authority moves from threat to permission. He has learned that the mathematics of legitimacy is a function of who writes the letterhead, but also of what is printed on the letterhead. Stadt Würzburg returned to official use in 1946. It meant more than ink. He scans a 1951 City Council motion to name a street after a writer exiled in 1933. The motion almost failed. The argument against it speaks of division and proposes instead something unifying, like Reconstruction Street. The motion passed after a long debate. The street sign went up. Children tripped over the name. The archive has one of the old signs in a storage room. He runs his fingers over the enamel as he would over a photograph. Names are arithmetic symbols. They make equations. They erase some and add others. They are not neutral. Archivists do not assign street names, but they keep them in rows, in boxes for later arithmetic. Carl knows the trick of the passive voice. He knows the phrase, "in our name." It appears in the 1980s. It creeps into school assembly speeches. He writes it in a notebook and circles it. The mathematics of responsibility has to account for the passive. It has to turn it into an active verb. It is not enough to say it was done. One must ask who did, who watched, who profited, who refused, who signed. The archive is good at who signed. It is less good at who watched. That is why oral histories matter, even when they are inaccurate. Accuracy and truth are not always overlapping sets. The intersection is what we are after. He scans a denazification file of a music teacher who marched in a uniform on weekends and played Mozart on weekdays. He scans his Perselschein, written by a former pupil. He taught me to love Schubert. He scans the Sprucegammer's verdict that calls him a Mitläufer and fines him 50 RM. He scans, later, a 1961 newspaper article that praises him for a concert in aid of a children's hospital. He thinks of the mathematics here, a life made of contradictory music, a ledger with red and black ink that refuses to sum. He is not a judge. He is a calculator and a recorder. He is a human being who knows that if you add certain number